Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Dojima Futures Exchange podcast. I'm your producer / guest host for this week, V, aka PurposeUnknown. Today we're joined by our previous guest from episode 1, 0x Carnation. We cover an interesting range of topics from recent crypto news to token governance, and even a brief lesson on biology and cancer. This was very impromptu, and if I'm honest, I think I clumsily fumbled my way through the conversation, but I hope you find it enjoyable. If you have time, please take a moment to like and subscribe, and leave us a rating if you can. Thanks again, and enjoy the show. I still think this is ridiculous that you can't do Twitter Spaces from desktop. It's like Bluetooth headphones and everything. Let's see, get this tweet out. Recording instead. Okay, there we are. Okay, there we go.
Hooray!
Hi.
Maybe.
So sorry everyone, I am very unfamiliar with hosting Twitter Spaces. I've never done it before. And this is just a very impromptu, we need a podcast episode. So Kitsune asked Carnation and I to come up with something for the Dojima Futures Exchange podcast, and that's what this is. We're going to record this. And I should tweet this out too. And then I'll retweet it from the podcast one. Okay, well, I'll start off with an easy one. Carnation, how are you?
I'm doing good. I mixed myself a very little drink. I've had half of it. It's pineapple and rum, and now I am slightly tipsy.
You mentioned a low alcohol tolerance. I have a bottle of pre-made orange margarita mix that is very tempting. I have it beside me, but it's also like only 420. So I'm not sure if I want to start drinking just yet.
All right.
I had some broad topics that we could talk about. Part of it was I wasn't sure how involved or aware about some of like the recent events going on, it seems like, with CT and various crypto or NFT things. So I don't know if we wanted to talk about those.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So the first one that I could think of is, and I'm not even sure what is going on with all of it, but this whole Milady situation. I don't know if you followed what's happened with like the Milady Maker NFTs and the.
Yeah, not so much. I would say Sarah is the much better person that's deep into the lore of all this. Do you know any of it that maybe you can actually enlighten me on?
Okay, so the best as I can explain it, as I understand it, is just it seems like your standard fare in terms of the creators, plural, have some kind of shady history. I say shady, but I mean like in the sense of like said some bad things, made fun of people, perhaps promoting some unpleasant ideologies. I haven't really gotten into it, but it just kind of stirs up the debate, in my mind, of kind of death of the author. Like for NFT projects, can you separate art from the artist and carry forward? Which I think is it seems like it's kind of difficult with NFTs because a lot of times with, say, traditional forms of media like books or music or other things, if you own art or music, or if you buy some sort of artistic production from them, like they get a one-time pay type of thing, and then it's typically effectively over. Whereas with NFTs, you have secondary sales in the marketplace that continually go to the creator. Um, and I know someone launched like wrapped miladies to kind of wrap them separately to prevent further funds from going to like the creators. But
Oh, yeah. I mean, several things, right? Like, I guess maybe we'll just branch off into random topics. Like, this was a thought that I was floating around before. It's like we can create like very fun and perpetual NFT Ponzi's just by tying some financial value to them. It's like, yeah, if we make NFTs basically into reflection tokens, we can collect a lot of taxes, and the taxes can basically go out as like a lottery style thing. So like as long as people keep transacting or trading these NFTs back and forth, there'll always be a lottery pot. So this will encourage people to trade in and out of these. Yeah, and potentially it's like a never-ending game.
perpetual funding.
Yes.
Um, that's actually an interesting concept, though. I didn't think of it in terms of like doing treating it as a tax. So if you could, yeah, using NFTs as like a tax mechanism for like,
Mm.
you're utilizing this NFT, purchasing it, whatever, and then using that for. It's just very bizarre and interesting, and seeing the types of people who are trying to like defend the creators or and then like also just looking at how NFTs can kind of spawn off their own collective like creative communities completely separate from whatever the origins of the project are too.
Right.
Like 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 I'm looking at some of the negative stuff, as I perceive it, negative stuff that like the creators quote unquote have espoused or said, and then I look at the people who actually own Miladies and I'm like, these are some of like the nicest, like the most awesome people I know. Like I certainly don't think they hold the same beliefs or ideology that the creators do.
Yeah, I guess so. Then it's like I see a couple of ladies um in the chat, I suppose. And so then it's
Right,
like,
yeah.
yeah, what caused them to buy into it and continue to support this? Or is it that more of a statement to say, like the creators' ideologies are really divorced from the communities, or not necessarily divorced, but like they're separate and they don't have to yeah, be in contact in any way.
Yeah, they can just kind of coexist and transform into their own thing. And we're already seeing that too with all sorts of like derivative projects like Milady motherfuckers, and now there's tubby Miladies coming too. So it's just the spark that creates like all sorts of various offsets. Um, so it's just I feel like though that's something that a lot of people struggle with in terms of like if you're using some if you own something or if you use something
Mhm.
or if even if you follow someone on Twitter, um is that an automatic like like people assume, oh, you must endorse their beliefs or ideology or whatever. I've seen that
Right,
rhetoric
yeah.
countless times and I just don't understand. I mean, I follow people on Twitter that I really am not a fan of, if nothing else, just to get interesting counter ideas to, you know.
Right, yeah. I mean, like, it's always good to keep an eye on your enemies, not to say we all have to be enemies.
Oh, right. Right, right. But even just like preventing a formation of an echo chamber. It's always good to get a diverse set of opinions um, on various topics because I sometimes find myself surprised, like, oh, I do agree with like I like people I follow who are like, I disagree with like 99% of what you say, but you have a good take once in a while. That type of thing. It's always interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, maybe the thought there is like, what is it that we're all looking for here on CT, right? In a way, I think people are looking for community a way to hang out with people to pass time while the markets go and do something, for the devs to go and do something. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I guess for a lot of people, then maybe the point is not to encounter, takes that are against one's own views. It's just to maybe to actually actively seek out echo chambers.
Yeah. And then and looking at the types of people who were coming out, and I saw a couple instances of folks like trying to defend the founders of Milady's, like, oh, they're not that, like, they're not associated, or they didn't actually say these things, or it's a joke.
Mm.
Um and it got me thinking too, because I'm gonna butcher his last name because I never uh the dude who got out of prison recently, Martin Shkreli. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but people like very big on, I guess he was in a space the other night, had a Twitter space, and now he has like a Milady profile picture, and it 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 got me thinking about this kind of what I've seen before of like idol worship in the crypto space,
Mm.
where you have very large, or you have prominent figure, you have figures who achieve this kind of like idol, I would say in some cases almost deity like status,
Right.
and people just, I don't want to, I don't want to come up, I don't want to say, oh, they're all sheep just blindly following. Nor am I going to imply that I'm like better for perhaps not doing so, but it's very worrisome, like Do Kwon with Terra, or even Daniel Esteza and Sifu with the
Mm.
Frog Nation. Just the idea of idolizing people
Right.
is very, in general, is very worrisome to me, because it's a method of not, it's like it's an easy way out to not necessarily think for yourself
Mm.
and just blindly gets, and very much a cult mentality to me.
Right.
uh
And
and I've just seen it pop up constantly.
mm, yeah, and what I think I'm noticing is also like it also tends to go in the other direction where, if you see someone with a lot of fame or clout or, success, then maybe the instinct is to go very hard in the other direction to try to um, sorry, bring them down isn't the right way. I don't mean like bring them down like negatively, but just to try to like say, oh, they're not so different, like they're smart, but like not all that smart, or try to like look for some flaws and like maybe yeah, like it is hard. I would say like people's fame and clout, like when you encounter them first, like it does kind of throw you off a little bit. Like you don't want to be like worshiping them, but also like saying that they're the same as everyone else is also a little bit um not exactly right.
Sorry, answering some Discord questions, comments, since we talked about
Yeah, maybe people,
possibly asking
yeah,
questions. Are we gonna show that here?
I mean, there are, I guess, a few ways to ask questions. You can DM them to V or DM them to me, and hopefully we can check those on time. I guess the other idea is if you pop into Femboy DAO's Discord, we will answer the questions from there, just because that is the most accessible Discord that is in common to most of us. And yeah, I don't think we have a specific channel dedicated to this, but if you just posted that into, I guess, the general channel, that should work. Yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about Femboy now at all? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I'm not too up to date to what's going on. Is there like anything we can like show publicly?
shill the femboys. Well, I mean, so I want to tread very carefully and make sure we're not like giving too much away too soon.
Okay.
We are still, talk about your favorite femboys. Uh, well, okay. So for those who may or may not know, Femboy DAO is a DAO, quote unquote, with the current project goal of making a collective set of femboy NFTs. And I'm hoping I'll be corrected if I haven't phrased that right. um, and so we're at a stage of, I mean, we have like artists in mind, that we've been reaching out to. But it's a gnosis in a mini skirt. It was funny too because I was thinking about like, okay, femboy DAO. How many actual femboys do we have in the DAO? Because we really don't have that many. Thinking about it.
Yeah. I think there are more appreciators than there are actual femboys.
Vastly outnumbered.
Yes.
I was like, can I think of 10? Can I think of 10 femboys? It's like, no, I couldn't even count that many. But yeah, it's a DAO with femboys and femboy appreciators, and we hang out and have a good time. I mean,
oh, it is extremely comfy and cozy. Yeah, like it's not constant like horny chat. Like there is some legitimate, life advice and just hang out with cool people.
pretty much. Although we do have dedicated channels for for being horny, but yeah, it's definitely not constant horny chat. Which I have to say, having been involved in CT in some capacity since I think probably like late summer of last year, CT is full of the horniest people I have ever met.
Right? Like
it's so bizarre.
yeah, I mean like why are you guys so horned? Like this is just I'm asking you guys in general. I don't know if anyone wants to share, but yeah, I mean the markets they just do something for people.
Yes, which explains why it's well, but yeah, I mean that you could make the argument both ways, right? In a bull market, people are not horny because or I guess they're horny, but they're distracted because everyone's making money and doing great. And in a bear market, no one's horny because everyone's depressed.
Yeah, and maybe we can even speculate a little, like the markets do feel like the casino sometimes, and when yeah, like not to say you need to constantly win, but every time you do win, like the little chemicals get flowing in your head, and I guess maybe after a while, this does really start to crosswire the other parts of your brain as well, and like people are saying I am the constant horny poster. Yes, there are a lot of horny posts, and maybe in some way the dedicated professional horny posters of CT, their media content starts cross-wiring everyone else's, into associating the crypto with CT, with being horny, and after a while, maybe that just starts into this positive feedback loop. And I mean positive in two senses. One where it reinforces itself, and one is that it's for the betterment of the world. Because when you're too horny, you are not able to do bad in the world.
I was literally going to say, yeah, no, it really is a psyop that we draw people in with lewd posting, and then we show them a token. That's how we get them.
Are we allowed to show tokens on the space?
Ooh,
probably not.
Yeah, it's not a recommended idea. But I mean, I haven't even, I guess other than hearing about, I was just gonna look. I was like, other than hearing quote unquote the market being down, I hadn't actually like watched the market actively. So I'm kind of just looking at it now. And it was so funny. I was it Kobe's podcast Up Only? They tweeted out like the trailer video and like it flipped to down badly, and they had footage of like one of the co-hosts and it showed footage of a forklift driver going out and like working in a construction yard or whatever, picking up pallets, and I've been like, I've joked about, because I used to be a forklift driver in various warehousing positions. And I'm like, am I really going to have to compete with all of CT for forklift positions? Is that how down bad this market is? Like, uh, it's just all a mess. It's just all a complete mess. But
Yeah, I mean, I thought we were all going to Wendy's though. Like, forklift.
Wendy's or McDonald's,
Yeah,
yeah. Of course, now we have the femboys have an easy out because they can go to femboy Hooters.
um, yeah. Is that one of the goals of Femboy now? Like, we're going to pull funds together to buy up a Hooters establishment and just franchise it, but
Or we're gonna turn them into femboy Hooters. Oh God. Oh. Oh, that would be great. Or even just like for a marketing thing, like for one day, just find a Hooters and be like, hey, we'll pay you X amount of dollars to like just put femboy above the Hooters sign.
exactly.
Just for one day so we can physically say.
And then the marketing slogan, or I don't know what they call this, but we'll just say, big tips only or something like that. Just...
in the effort of course, attempting to look intelligent or some sort of efficient like trader speculator, what do you think of like the broader market? I've seen various like we're gonna be in a bear. Perhaps this is the start of a crypto winter. I've seen that BTC ETH is like massively oversold and we're due for another up correction. And then just especially looking at the broader markets as well, like people are thinking equities are down globally. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so just to let people know, like I am not a trader at all. I actually never really like exit my positions. So like it's mostly about understanding like these various chains and tokens, DeFi ecosystem and movements, and like just trying to understand like how this ties in with the rest of the world. And where my thoughts come in is actually, hopefully everything does go to zero. Not in the sense that it actually number go to zero, but it can go low for as long as possible. And that makes me happy because how I approach this is how can we squeeze more money out of the system doing other things to accumulate these assets while they're cheap, right? So this is a completely different mindset than what the traders do. The traders are just predicting the next movement of the assets. So for me, like definitely I am like 100% exposed to the market. I have enough income and stable coins set aside so like I can live comfy for the next while. So like my runway is good. But yeah, everything else, all my net worth isn't exposed to crypto. So like when I say like I hope everything goes down, it's not that like I'm trying to time buying the bottom or something like that. It's mostly just given that I do have income and given that I am trying out various yield strategies, it's advantageous to me that the things I'm trying to accumulate go down.
Trying and maximizing your accumulation state. No, that's I kind of agree with that position. I will clarify that I am also not a trader, having done some various trading over the years. I actually used to trade like penny stocks, which did not go well. And then I tried trading crypto, which did not go well. So I would not consider myself a trader, and I am very much effectively out of. I hold very little crypto assets in contrast, with the exception of countless, JPEGs that illiquid JPEGs that may or may not potentially go up in value later.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely very much watching this from, as of right now, from a speculator's point of view. It's like whatever happens with the market, I'm just gonna watch and wait for right now.
Gotcha. I mean, without revealing which NFT collections you hold, like what are some of your favorite ones?
Okay. I have to be very careful not to, because I definitely do not want to shill. I will say that, and people who have followed me may have seen, I do hold a large, I say large, it's not that large. I do hold quite a few from a collection that I actually animate their NFTs for. Um, and they're potentially releasing some new stuff soon. I'm trying very hard to like not explicitly say it or like even mention what they are because I don't want to come off as shilling. But I've done some animation work and I regularly post that on my timeline for an NFT collection that I hold quite a few of. So I'm kind of hoping those do well. And I might actually get paid for those animations too. We'll see what happens with that. Uh,
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
yeah, we'll see. I mean, I haven't even been following really the NFT market too. Like, I the people that constantly like you had people who talked about this is probably months back, but like the whitelisting, the grinding, the for various NFT projects, just doing all of the constant like retweeting and um mass following to like gather whitelist spots or get in early on mints and stuff. And I just looked at a lot. I don't have the mentality to keep up with all these different NFT projects. It's like so ADHD, attention dividing. I was like, I need to find like a few good ones to stick with and follow, and that I like the people in, and
Yeah.
the vibe is good, and go from there. Because otherwise, I'm gonna lose my mind.
I have like a thought to float by you. Like this is something I heard from someone else that sort of makes sense to me. It's like all these different hoops that the projects put the I guess the community through. It's just a form of like civil resistance, right? They don't want to whitelist just a whole bunch of bots. Like they want to whitelist people, and by putting in like as many of these random like grinding tasks as possible, it just becomes more likely that the people are real. But at the same time, the people tell me that they've got all these automation steps set up now, so they can bypass all the common like grinding tasks.
Yeah, it's. I mean, civil resistance is a extremely difficult, if not, do I say, likely impossible problem to solve. Um, Obviously, you can put as many mechanisms in place uh, to protect against that, or civil attacks, I should say. But just uh, and again, it's just more even with the people that do have automation steps. Like I if you have the mentality to be able to set all of that up and go through them all and deal with it all, it's great. But I definitely do not. So it's just uh, which which I feel like it is kind of contrarian because I'm very much I feel like I'm the type of person to reach out and help with so many different things. I animate NFTs and I agreed to help with Kitsune's podcast and being a community manager for various different places. So actually, there's a question. There's an opinion, or there's an opinion I can ask for. What do you think in terms of a mentality of approaching the crypto space, be it NFTs or DeFi or whatever? Do you think a specialist, like niche mentality is better or worse to have than, say, like a generalist, all around, tackling everything kind of mentality? If that makes sense as a question.
Yeah, I do. And just before that, I had another thought. Saying that you help on so many things, like so do I, and it's like so true that when we say Web3, it means you're working 3 different jobs, most unpaid. Yeah, okay. That aside, so when it's about building things, there maybe just one observation is that yeah, like there definitely is a wide spectrum of people who are extremely technical, like basically world class, top three in whatever it is they do. And then there are people who are just like, coming from typically non-traditional, or I guess traditional one word, like non-crypto, non-tech, non-financial backgrounds who are just in this space and like learning as they go. So like, like people who are generally smart, but maybe not like experts too deeply into any of these subjects. And then it's like, like most things in life, it is about a balance because like I definitely talked to some teams who are very like, for example, technical and builder focused, where like again, like they're world class in that particular, niche, whether it's cryptography, whether it's um yeah, blockchain related stuff, that what they built is technically flawless, basically. But at the same time, it's like they're building for problems that potentially don't exist. They're maybe providing a service that people aren't willing to pay for. Not to say like, those can be made into public goods or other things, but it's mostly about, I guess two things that, or maybe two is two. Okay. Trying to gather my thoughts. It depends on what your goal is, right? For some people in the space, all they wanted to do is to build something new, build something cool. Like they don't actually care if anyone ever uses it as long as it works. They don't care if they're getting paid for or not because this is just, I had a cool idea. I'm going to go build it. And now it exists. Ta-da. And so like, I have no criticisms for that because that is wonderful, right? It shows us what is possible that nobody else has, thought up or has thought up but has never successfully pulled off before. And on the other hand, which is more along where I lie, is like, yeah, we're trying to create value in the space, and that becomes as much of a business problem as it becomes like the actual like technical like product building problem, where it is you need to figure out, what do people want in the space, and maybe people can't even tell you. It's like you have to think of an idea and then try to figure out if people want that or how much they're willing to pay for that. And okay, this is straying a little off topic, but to circle back, it's like if the goal is to, for example, build a DeFi protocol that generates value in the space by providing a useful service to some users or to some other protocols, then it definitely takes much more of a generalist mindset because you have to be aware of all these different things that are going on and not just the things that exist, but to also notice the gaps of what should be there to help everything go along smoother, but doesn't currently exist yet. I think that is what is one of the most critical yet intangible skills in this space. It's not to see what exists, but to see what doesn't exist but should exist.
I agree. I definitely agree. And your comment in terms of like the different types of jobs, and especially the different types of people coming from perhaps, as you said, non-technical or non-crypto or non-finance backgrounds. I just had some various points flying in my head, and the amount of times I have attempted to read like a technical white paper and got to the end of it and concluded I am not smart enough for this. Like I'm looking at this and they're really smart people, and this is just not for me. And some of it too is thinking to like traditional corporate structure. If you've heard the term bullshit jobs, the jobs that perhaps unnecessary like administrative work or just attempting to fill a void or attempting to create a need where there isn't one.
I mean,
but then also,
yeah,
sorry.
No, I was going to say, like, would you put the feds who are spying on us right now into that category?
Oh, they're like essential workers. Are you kidding me? Heck, they're probably not getting paid enough.
Right? Like it's a 24/7 job. Like we're making them horny all the time and they have no way to relieve themselves while on the job.
It's just absolute torture, and they're underpaid, and which you would think is more incentive for them to come join us. But I lost my train of thought for a second. But I mean, there's certainly, and especially after listening to the first episode of this podcast with you and Kitsune, it was definitely very relieving, or I say relieving even though I kind of knew that was the case, but relieving / reassuring to be like, okay, you can come into this space, this Web3 crypto, whatever broad term label you want to slap onto it, and you don't have to have a super technical mind or a super Yeah, right. And you know, you don't have to have a background in finance. There are definitely positions for everyone. Um,
Yeah,
which I think just needs to be a not like a consistent every day, but like reminded once in a while, like, hey, you know, you don't have to be a shadowy supercoder to be here.
yeah, absolutely. I think like that point never gets hammered home enough. I know everyone says it, and it always feels like there is some sort of invisible barrier. Like especially, I guess, so I come from a scientific background, and this is one of the things that is really neat, but also like very sorry, what creates the barrier in a lot of these technical fields is the use of jargon or technical terms. And these terms exist for a very good purpose because they're very narrowly and specifically defined words so that people can communicate ideas in, with very few precise vocabulary as opposed to like long phrases to like specify what they're saying. So like this makes communication among people in the know a lot easier. But to people coming from outside, when they encounter like basically even a very small paragraph of text, it contains a lot of jargon that for each one they have to look up. It actually expands into basically, a very long page of text. And where I'm going with this is like, even though we say that we try to make crypto or DeFi like accessible, like to a lot of people, this is probably still like 5 or 6 layers too deep, no matter how well we try to explain it. And I'm just picturing back to how I try to explain these things like to my parents, like they're well educated, but not in the technology or financial fields, and trying to explain something like, how we make yield in DeFi. It is so far beyond like one jump, like as in like before that, you have to understand, okay, how do you get yield in the traditional finance world in a banking system? Who pays people interest for what type of things? And how do we do that on chain and how do things like that? So like it's several levels removed. And yeah, I guess I don't have a particular point there. It's just like when a lot of people, let's say they're new to this and they want to learn more about the space, they can't just go ask someone and say, teach me, what is yield? Because that severely underestimates how much prerequisite knowledge you need to build up to get to that point. It's not something like you can get like a 20% understanding in 5 minutes, no problem. But, to really go like 80, 90, or 95% of the way, it's a long study.
For sure. It definitely requires it definitely requires a good amount. There's a sense of assumed knowledge. And we definitely see a lot of that with like crypto UI or UX. Like you tell someone, okay, you have a wallet. That most people, I would say a broad amount of people understand what a wallet is. And if your next step is then to say, all right, you have to sign a transaction, you have immediately lost like so many people.
Yes.
Like, what, sign a transaction? What are you talking about? And so to draw a parallel with like your technical terms, like with yield, I have to tread very carefully, make sure I'm not overstepping bounds. But I was talking with someone, talking about like capital efficiency and trying to simplify it down for quote unquote normies. It's like, how do you even explain a term like liquidity? Like just the term liquidity or even, it's trying to find the right balance between simplifying terms enough, explain like I'm five type of thing. But I think to some degree, and I think a lot of projects are, I would say if they're not, they probably have to be not necessarily dumbing it down, but translating it to terms that their target markets can understand, yield or liquidity into things like capital efficiency. Especially with like, if we're going from a finance perspective for DeFi, like trying to bring in traditional finance, you have to convert it to terms that those folks will understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is like a slight tangential thought, and it's like to for people to come into this space, I think the best way to do that is to um, pick something, and I mean maybe like a community or something, and just like stick by it and absorb things through osmosis. Because like yeah, I feel like the only way to really get familiar with any body of knowledge is to just have constant exposure to it. You know, it forces your thoughts to keep returning to the same words, the same concepts, over and over again. And like, I guess like in education, it's just like, repetition reinforces, memory and things like that. Um, and yeah, like I guess like in DeFi, like there is no classroom for this. There's no textbook for this. All we have is this living community of people who carry most of, the really good stuff in their heads. And so like, going to one of these, for example, DeFi, like one of these OG protocols, let's say Yearn, Maker, Compound, Aave, just hang out in the discords, things like that. Like eventually, like everything does feel like jumping into the deep end of the pool, but eventually some of these things start to click. Every time you encounter something you don't understand, you try to look it up. Maybe there's like a 3-minute YouTube video on it. And after a while, this is like my general like experience. It's like, yeah, there are like a lot of things like, for example, you mentioned the word liquidity. Like at first it's like, yeah, like, okay, liquid's wet. What does it have to do with money? But eventually it starts to click and you say, oh, okay, this is what people mean. So like when liquidity goes up in a pool, like, what are the consequences of that? Like, yeah. And it's weird because the learning itself definitely is gradual. Like every term you don't know, you look up, that's one more term you know. But there is sort of a threshold where, if you understand maybe 70-80% of all the words and concepts that are coming through, suddenly a lot of things click, that are higher level concepts. And it's like a really interesting feeling.
Right. And as you say, just consistent exposure, over time, quote unquote, you just absorb that body of knowledge.
Yes, just keep exposing yourself.
Yeah, and I do find it interesting because a lot of people that I talk to will use the term like LARPing, like everyone's LARPing that they are something or that they know something. But you could phrase that in a different way as fake it till you make it, right?
Exactly.
I don't know anything about DeFi, but I'm gonna LARP until I vaguely think I have an understanding to try and tackle it. Flip the insult on its head. It's like, fine, call me a LARP. I'll figure it out eventually.
Right.
But even I was just gonna quickly like a super simple term swap, like with TradFi and DeFi or crypto finance, like we go from trading to swapping, especially from like a DEX context. You're not trading stocks, you're swapping tokens. It's just a simple. So, I mean, people talk about like crypto trading, obviously, but a swap is a trade, is the same type of mechanism. So,
yeah, I guess like maybe the thing that got lost in translation there is like TradFi, they reserve the word swap for something else. It's like a mandatory like options. So basically like an agreement where by some time you need to make an exchange. Like that is a swap.
So then the question becomes, which again goes back to protocol builders, creators type of thing, which would be easier trying to, or I guess would that be then a failure of DeFi to not properly carry over the correct terminology then? Or was it just we've invented our own terminology and we didn't think about what TradFi does, like two separate entities, or how much influence did or does TradFi have on protocols or projects versus just inspiration lifting various things. It's just a lot to think about. It's just so much to think about. Oh, so much to consider. Or just build it anyways and then go back and clean up the mess later.
Yeah.
Or as someone's putting I'm reading in Femboy Down his card, inventing new jargon so we can gatekeep TradFi out. Yes, if they can't understand, well, except we need them to understand because we need them to buy our bags. Like, wait, hang on.
Although, like, we're not done accumulating our bags, so maybe this can wait.
I just have like a streamlined you put that as a project roadmap. Like, all right, we have terminology, and we will tell you what some of these terms mean at X point in time after we have accumulated.
Exactly.
So
the last point on any DeFi project's roadmap is, okay, now we explain to institutional capital so they understand and come buy our bags.
Yes. Or yeah, the public sale is last, like way further down the line of the token or whatever. Okay, I'm trying to think too because I feel like I had something else I wanted to talk about. Talked about Miladies and NFTs and tokens and this could be like the Carnation and V variety hour. Look at how can we fill the time?
Yeah.
You mentioned you came from a scientific background, though.
Yeah.
Did you want to expand on that a little bit? I don't recall how much from the previous time.
Yeah, I can share a little more about that. So I come from biomedical research on the side of trying to cure diseases by looking at a large amount of biological data, essentially. Let me just quickly think for a moment how much I can go into details on that. Okay, yeah. So essentially, something cool in the biomedical sciences over the last decade or two is the proliferation of these high throughput data acquisition technologies, so mostly DNA sequencing, RNA sequencing, as well as like quantitative measurements using like these things we imported over chemistry, like these are so cool. They're like particle accelerators, but essentially you take a cell, you ablate a little bit of it, or sorry, ablate means like you use laser to fry it, and all the little particles get vaporized, and you shoot these through like these accelerators. You see where they land to infer what was the chemical composition of what was spat out of the cell, essentially. So basically, like we have all these ways to monitor the genetic information that's permanent in the cell. We can monitor, gene expression, which is the term to say how much of each part of these informations are active. And then thirdly, we can see the actual process of the proteins working. Actually, maybe I'll take a 5-minute biological 101, bio 101 for everyone. So our body is very neat. What's happening in our body is we are a whole bunch of cells. We're a collection of cells. So inside all your cells, you have basically pretty much identical set of DNA, right? These are, you have you have 23 pairs of chromosomes, one set from mommy, one set from daddy. And these are present in all your cells, but not all your cells are the same, right? So why aren't they all the same? Why aren't we just a soup of bacteria or something like that? It's because inside each cell, what makes them different is only some of the genes, some of the genetic materials from the DNA are being actively used. So for you techie people out there, essentially you have one long code base, and depending on which cell you are, you comment different parts of the code out. Or you can say you're overloading some functions here and there so that like depending on which cell you are, when you call this function, it does something else different. So in that sense, what makes a brain cell different from a liver cell, for example, then is in a brain cell, there are quote unquote genes that only work inside brain cells. If you try to turn them on in the liver, they wouldn't work, or they would do something completely unexpected. So in that sense, like I don't know the rough statistic. I think it's like, there are a bunch of genes that's turned on in each one of these cells, and a lot of them are metabolism. They basically just say, stay alive. Here is how you break down sugar. This is how you make energy. This is how you keep dividing. So all cells have that. But, for the brain cells that need to fire like electrical impulses, they definitely need very specialized genes to function. Okay, so all that being set aside, the disease that I was doing research on was cancer. And it's a fascinating and devastating disease. It's fascinating because it arises from your own body. There's a lot of evolutionary sciences that I won't go back into, but Darwin is so smart. So essentially, cancer is arising from some of your cells starting to turn on genes that are reserved for mostly early embryonic development, right? So the early embryo, all it does is proliferate very, very quickly, right? It doesn't necessarily care about anything else, just its own survival. And in some ways, when we grow and mature, most of our cells turn those functions off because they're very dangerous functions in the sense that they can be like quite unrestrained and things like that. Sorry. Where I'm going with that thought is when you age, a lot of damage accumulates in your cells into the DNA as a form of mutations. So back to the code analogy, that's like saying basically you have your hard drive, and after some time, this hard drive is actually not stable. Part of the the bits, the zeros and ones flip occasionally. And so if you flip the comment sections on and off in some of your code, then your code starts behaving erratically. So then in our adult cells, if you turn on by accident these genes that are reserved for early development, then these cells start acting like they're cells in early development. So they start doing things like dividing rapidly. They start, taking a lot of resources. And then the other really scary thing about them is that they start migrating in the body. So in early development, you start as one little ball of cells. And for the various body parts to form, cells need to differentiate and move. So that means inside this ball, they need to figure out, okay, which side is supposed to be the head? So we're going to grow the brain there. Which spots are supposed to be where the arms and legs come out. So like these cells, they have to actually move past each other to be able to organize like that. So in cancer, they don't actually figure out necessarily what they are. They just know that, okay, I feel like I need to keep expanding, I need to keep moving, and I need to keep growing and taking up resources. So the end stage of most cancers is that the cancerous cells, they just completely disregard the other parts of your body. They just treat it as basically soil, to extract nutrients and value from, and just keep expanding. And at some point, when the load of cancer cells inside the body is too high, just in general, or they're concentrated in your vital organs, such as the brain, the lungs, the liver, then those organs stop functioning. And basically, life stops at that point because the overall burden of the disease is just too high. So that is the disease. So how we try to go about attacking cancer is to figure out, okay, so the theory is that these cancer cells are turning on these genes that are normally turned off in order to basically become cancerous. But how much evidence can we put on each one of these genes as the most effective culprit or the effective cause of these cancers? So then we can actually develop either chemical drugs or some other way to suppress the activity of these genes and make the cancer go away. So for example, just very concretely, let's say in a cell, like typically 80 to 90% of the genes might be turned off, either because they're reserved for other parts of the body, the other organs, or for early development. And a cancer, you turn on like 20, 30% of them. So these are all possible candidates for what is causing this cancer. So of all these candidates, how do we figure out, which one is responsible or which one is most responsible? So alluding back to the proliferation of DNA sequencing technologies and the other RNA and protein sequencing technologies, we can essentially take a lot of patient samples process them all and just ask the question, okay, let's say in everyone who's had liver cancer, what are the common genes that got switched on? Or when these genes are switched on, do we have enough evidence to say these patients, the disease got more aggressive or less aggressive, right? So these are basically quantitative ways we can assess how much evidence do we have to point to a single gene being the major driver of disease. So that was a large part of my work, which is basically examining, very large public data sets to figure out, okay, given that we have around 20,000 genes in the body, there are so many ways they can go wrong. Can we just prioritize the top 5, 10 different genes in each one of these cancers in the body to be able to say, okay, now we basically have a list of candidates. Can we experimentally play with these genes in cells in a dish or in, lab mice, and try to see if we can affect the course of disease. So we have positive experiments and negative experiments, not like good and bad, but for example, like positive means like you can try to turn these genes on in cells and see, if you can make the cells more aggressive as cancer cells. Then negative means you try to take this gene away or you suppress it in some way, and you see if a cancer cell can be returned to more of a less aggressive state or even closer to a normal healthy cell. That was a much longer spiel than I intended, but basically it was a two-tiered approach, basically. Like instead of starting with a particular hypothesis of what's going on, we just look for commonalities between people who had cancer and especially very aggressive cancer to give us a list of candidates that we can experimentally try to verify. And then we perform the experiments to verify those things.
Very interesting spiel. I don't want you to think you went way too long or way too over. Very fascinating stuff. And I couldn't help but kind of try and draw it back to you mentioned the utilization of technical jargon to convey points between people in the same field who want to understand, or who understand like everything involved to where you can communicate more effectively with them. But I mean, hearing that entire conversation, it was very, I don't know, like explain like I'm 5, but maybe explain like I'm 10 or 12. I certainly don't think any of like your explanation of anything involved went above my head, at least.
Right.
Which I think just highlights how important that type of work is.
Yeah, like a part of, so I definitely, like, this is not flexing, but I explain these a lot better than a lot of my previous colleagues, because not that they're wrong, but their head is actually just very deep into this. They don't think, like, they're trying to go deeper in the field, not necessarily trying to bring like the learnings and like the theories of the field back to the public. So like
they're like the pure academics.
Yeah. And so I'm not in education specifically, but there was a lot of work I did trying to teach people some of these things, like not maybe officially as a teacher, although I did do some tutoring around these subjects. But yeah, so like I've had like each one of these concepts that we're talking about now, like I've had to explain them maybe 10, 20 different times, like on different occasions in different ways to different people to try to get them to understand. And maybe the point there is like, it's only through that repeated trial and error of trying to explain these concepts that I was able to arrive at a set of words or a set of analogies that tend to work well just off the bat. And yeah, for people who are trying to explain things for the very, very first time, it is actually extremely difficult, no matter which field it is, because you're just struggling to come up with another way to phrase something without involving any jargons, without involving any sophisticated concepts.
Right. Which also goes back to the whole like assumed knowledge as well.
Mm,
You know, you're in a Twitter space with mostly people involved, I would say, in crypto in some form. So you're definitely not, I would probably say safe to assume you're definitely not assuming that anyone here has a background in
mm,
genetic analysis or that type of work. So, you know, I guess as you say, figuring out a baseline of language, like the this is the minimum terminology I will
mm.
use in this instance, and then oh, if I am at a cancer conference or something, I can up the jargon of it, type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. And that's a good point there. It's like that's one of the lesser popularized skills, but it's definitely very important. It's to be able to operate at maybe 3 to 5 different levels of expertise. Like, have you seen these YouTube videos where like some expert in some field tries to explain it to like 3 or 4 different people at like different
Oh
ages?
yeah, the different
Yeah,
levels
yeah.
of explanation. Yeah, no, that's really fascinating stuff.
Right. So like in some ways, like that is definitely very lacking in crypto, DeFi, and just tech in general. Because like for most people working in these fields, everyone they talk to on a daily basis are people at that exact same level. So like they actually don't need to like uh I guess dumb it down is one way to put it, but like find simplified ways where everyone can understand, use like very lay and common language. But at the same time, they don't actively try to go beyond. Like most people, unless they're like the very technical people doing the very technical things, most people are actually stuck in the middle where like if you don't actively try to keep, bring it back to the lay level, and also like if you don't actively try to go deeper, you sort of just get stuck and used to a certain um I don't even know the right way. Like it's like not frame of reference, but yeah, it's like layer of complexity, I guess.
Yeah, layer of complexity and understanding, and where's the right balance.
Mm,
Um, it was like I uh I can give a tiny bit about my background. I was very heavily involved in warehousing and logistics for several years. Um, I mean, put it bluntly,
mm,
early on I was a package handler, and then eventually moved up to like under various like in charge of receiving departments for various like third party logistics companies.
mm,
And it was the right balance of not knowing not knowing enough technically about a given tool set or a given something, not knowing enough to be like a developer, but using that as an advantage in like, okay, if I'm approaching this tool, whatever I have to use, I understand some of the technical stuff behind it, but I think like an end user. So I'm going to look at this from an end user's perspective, and if I don't get it like an end user, how am I going to explain
mm.
it to the guys on the floor? Like,
Right.
how are the other grunt workers going to understand this if
Mm,
I can't understand it? Because and which I think is not only a useful skill in terms of trying to take complex terminology or jargon and simplifying it down, but also kind of acting as a glorified translator. If you know enough, if you're perhaps to kind of borrow like what you mentioned earlier compared to like your colleagues or coworkers who were much more like double down onto the academic, like the literature and that type of thing, having the balance between being personable to where you can relate to the layperson, the everyman, um, but also having enough technical knowledge to perhaps understand and talk to the more academic types, being that kind of, for lack of a better term, glorified translator
mm.
is I would argue, a very important skill set to have. Um,
Yeah. A few add-on thoughts. One, before I forget, is like package handler is a great job title, and fanboy Hooters should have that. Um, I don't know which job descriptions, but just to say we should. Okay. Yeah, the next one is sort of like the curse of knowledge, where actually once you've understood something, it's almost impossible to imagine not knowing it, right? It's like when you speak to I guess like little kids about like just before they learn certain math concepts, like like if you speak to someone in elementary who hasn't encountered division yet, that is such a crazy concept. Or like even once you learn multiplying, like doing division, let's say devising or division, it's such like at this point, like sorry, no, lost my thought there. But yeah, like something that seems quite normal and like it doesn't even spend like much mental effort anymore. These things, like to someone who's never encountered before, is such a stark contrast that like it's almost hard to imagine. Like I would, I guess, like have everyone here do like a little mental experiments. Like, do you remember like before some of these things? I just use like math as a common example. Like multiplying or like division, like you've already mastered like adding numbers, and then like, oh, subtracting was so hard, and then you got past that, and it's like people just keep throwing these like newer and newer like exotic and bizarre things at you, and like some of these things they take, like I think it took me on the order of weeks to finally get division. It definitely didn't click for me like the first few times the teacher taught it. Like it's through like not to say grunt work, but like doing the homework, the exercise, and just trying to go at it repeatedly, getting it wrong and trying to figure it out. Yeah. Sorry, where I'm going with that thought is like the curse of knowledge is, yeah, it's a very useful skill in the space. And it's, like you said, be like maybe someone along the general roles of like product manager or someone like that, where they can coordinate what, the technical people should build, and also like the end users, like what their experience of using it is. Like I know like that's not the exact or like complete role of a product manager, but basically someone to go as this bridge between these two very different worlds.
Yeah, trying to translate, almost trying to translate different languages in some sense. Um, yeah, and so there never really is. I think I said earlier something about like finding the right balance, but there never really is the perfect balance in the sense of, as you say, the curse of knowledge. Once you know, you've gone, you can't you can perhaps forget without repetition, but dependent on the subject, it's like some things will just be embedded and you just take for granted. And so it's really just what level of specialization do you want to go into for a given subject or topic?
Right. Yeah. And here's like I guess another mental framework to think about it. Like if you're literally thinking about like two islands that's separated by a bridge of water, like like let's say on one side it's the technical people, and one side it's the lay and users. Like maybe it's like a very a long river where like if it's a small river, like yeah, you can just like build one of those like single arch bridges over just a normal stone bridge, like very primitive, and like that's enough. Like if the gap isn't too big, basically one person is enough. But if you look at like big large bridges that cross like either like very large rivers or potentially even like straits, like big even larger bodies of water, you need essentially several arches where you have I forgot the terms, right? I'm not an architect, so the foundation's easy. Sorry, the analogy there is basically instead of having one person go from one end directly to the other end, you might want to have several people with overlapping levels of understanding, where it gets gradually more technical on the other side, and gradually more lay on the other end. So like that way, you do not need to place this like Herculean task of having someone to be able to go, all the way from explain it like I'm five, all the way to like, a world expert on that topic. Yeah.
Having a broad spectrum of understanding through the form of various people.
Yes.
Layers of abstraction through different. And we can only hope, I'm not sure how my brain got on this, but we can only hope that there is, I suppose, the idealistic would be like people are doing that for the greater benefit, trying to help lay people instead of I for lack of a better term, like wielding that knowledge and abusing lay people, or trying to borrow a term, extract capital or value from lower people.
I mean, here's the other thing, right? Like when you're working or participating in this space, you are filling in one of those gaps. You're playing the role of overlap for someone out there. And it's not that you have, like, of course, it's nice if you actively, see someone struggling and help them out. But just by being in that space and being like a passive, like, sponge where you soak up knowledge from someone and maybe, you rephrase and pass it to someone else. But every time that happens, like knowledge is transformed from like, one perspective to another one. And like, it's that process of people keep like, it's the same thoughts, but it's circling through people over and over again and slightly different. Okay, my mental picture here is like the game of telephone. So like the active creativity and creation itself, like a lot of that is in this game of telephone. It's every time it passes through someone, you have something new to come out at the end of it. And if you can find a way to actively keep this cycle going, you basically have this creativity engine. Not to say like anyone was particularly like brilliant or in that moment. Like, sorry, how do I phrase this? Like there's two ways to think about creating something new. Like one is like you sit down and intentionally to have new thoughts. Like that's one way. The other way is much more serendipitous. It's by introducing mistakes. Like because we can only retain so much information, like when we play the game or like when we try to rephrase things, there's always things lost, not because of intentionally, it's just how things go, like we're not like perfect like voice recorders or something like that. So these little mistakes, they get introduced through time and actually can help introduce like this source of randomness. Yeah, I guess like that's what the people like. This is a source of randomness, and you can either see it as a flaw, like the people who try to do like error correcting codes, they try to revert it. So that's how we built like perfect voice recorders. But the other people are like, okay, well, like let this blossom, right? Like this is more the evolutionary point of view. It's like every time we take two people, we create a new baby, a new person. It's not a perfect sum of the material that was passed down. There's always mistakes, and these are like physical in nature, where when you copy DNA, or like you can think about for the technical people like zeros and ones, like the replicating mechanism there is imperfect. It's highly, highly reliable, like better than 1 in a million are mistakes. So like almost everything is copied exactly, except once in a while, something new, something random has happened. And yeah, like this is a fun part where there are all these things that are neutral in the universe, as in like randomness in itself is not good or bad, but something like the process of evolution has taken advantage into making it something useful. And I'm saying like these things, like they have intentionality, like they don't, like evolution doesn't intentionally do anything, but it's just a funny way to describe like things that perpetuate constantly. Yeah.
No, literally, I like that's a really good way of putting it. To specifically using the theory of evolution, like applying it to the idea of telephone, a message being passed through, and as someone will hear that and will not inherently be able to replicate a perfect translation to pass that on. To your point of neutrality, a mutation could happen, which could be both negative or positive, beneficial. So I really like and it's a really good idea to promote, taking it back to like the whole multiple levels of understanding, because I mean it's 50-50, right? Because the more people you have, the level of mutation in their understanding can be beneficial in the sense of iterating and sparking creativity.
Mm,
Someone will hear your message, your information, and be like, well, what if we did it from this way or this,
right.
put a different spin on it or perspective.
Mm,
But also how much of that is lost in translation to where here are the academics at the top.
right.
They don't have to go
Mm,
to a layperson and explain. They have to go all the way down the chain and make sure that the core message stays the same all the
yeah.
way down. Because otherwise, well, wait, what? These people at the end don't understand it at all. What was
Mm,
lost in translation? How many layers do we have to go through to figure
yes.
out where the message went awry?
Yes. And there's several really good points in here. One of them being this is why you should talk to people who know less than you. They're going to have to, they're going to ask you the hard questions. It's like, wait, I don't understand. Like, why is it this way and not the other way, which I naively assumed, basically? And that forces you, as the person who might know more, to try to actually sort some thoughts out. Because when we, in general, take in information, like especially in a classroom, we go at it from the perspective of just memorizing first and understanding later. And the act of understanding only comes when you start questioning it. And questioning facts or like, conclusions of like certain, or I guess like experiments or like pieces of data, like that is extremely difficult. Like, maybe this isn't the best example, but it's the one that came to mind. It's like, like something like in physics, the double slit experiment. And again, like, don't ask me the technical details because it still baffles me. But the point just being like the the way where people came up with a lot of theories is because they had very confusing observations or people asking like very confusing like thought experiments. Maybe the thought experiment type is like Schrodinger's cat, although like some people say like his point wasn't actually that. Anyway, just to say that like not to not to say that when you don't know anything, you can't play an important role for someone else, right? Because very concretely, if you are working with someone who is a lot more technical or has a lot more expertise in a particular field than you, then you can actually play a very valuable role for them just by being there and constantly asking them why, like 5 times to the same question. Like they explain something, it's like, okay, but why is it like that? And they explain another way. You ask them, okay, but why is it like that? Why isn't it like this? And so, like, if you, I think like this is like a popularized concept where if you ask somebody why 5 times, you get to pretty much the heart of the matter. And that is such a mentally brutal process. Like it's unpleasant for both sides unless you learn to enjoy it. But it is definitely very useful. Yeah.
Ah, it's perfect. I can be a petulant child and pester people with
Mm-hmm.
questions over and over.
Yeah, some of my favorite people in this space, they know so much more than I do, and I just play the role of, okay, tell me about this, and I ask them, okay, I'm assuming these things, so am I right? And they're like, no, you're wrong, and like it, okay, it doesn't destroy my ego, but like that doesn't feel good because it's like, oh, I'm doing my best, and people keep telling me I'm wrong. But I guess that's another point here, right? Because okay, this is slightly philosophical, but I would say the world has a certain amount of truth to it. We're all trying to get as much of that in our heads. And the only way we can align what's in our heads with reality is to present them to the outside and have it either be confirmed or denied. So what I mean by that is like, like the actual like DeFi ecosystems or like economical and financial systems, like they're very, very complex. Like, yes, at the end of the day, there probably is some like truth or like mechanism to it, but it could be reflexive, it could be chaotic, it could be a lot of things, and we're all trying to like grab some um, level of understanding to it. And like we all have like our I don't know if they're even theories, but like for example, when people do market analyses, things like that, they have these concepts, theories, foundations, and actually just assumptions that they're basing it off of. And it's dangerous in a lot of ways because um, these I don't want to say facts. These concepts are being taught and advertised and used as if they are true, and there's nothing truer beyond them. And where am I going with this thought? It's that yeah, okay, that's slightly straying. So the thought is, when we learn complicated subjects, we don't always end up with the best version of what closely matches reality, like by definition, right? That's why we're learning. But to make learning faster, you have to keep telling people, here's what I know, and here are the predictions I can make. And either someone else will tell you, okay, here's evidence you're wrong, or the world will show it to you. And in finance, something I really like, but could potentially also be very dangerous, is the numbers going up and down. Like, besides like gambling on 1 minute candles, like on, for example, if you're running a certain strategy, like you do have a set of predicted and expected range of outcomes. And so if, your outcomes are either overperforming or underperforming that, then that means something went wrong, right? Because it was something outside what you expected. So like the market is actually a really cool grounds for experimentation where you can get very clear and precise and quantifiable outcomes. Again, not to say like the gambling on 1 minute candle kind, like there's good experiments and bad experiments, but also just to say you should test things out with people or back testing or on paper before you actually put a lot on it, because the market is ruthless. And if you're operating with assumptions about reality that actually turn out not to be true, the market will punish you very harshly for it.
I definitely think there are broader implications or trends or things in terms of understanding a market that can arguably be tested, or theories and calculations and such implemented on. But I mean, part of why I kind of stepped out of trading was the whole, no, the market is the market is operators in the market are humans who I consider fundamentally irrational creatures. And so capable of rationality, but fundamentally like irrational. To simplify it, it's like the market, as the saying goes, like the market can be irrational longer than you can be solvent, then you can last in the market. And so I'm like, attempting to try and understand or quantify that type of rationality, to me, eventually just became like, it's so much of a futile exercise. I can't keep up with it. It's just way beyond, like, I'm not even gonna, best way to win is not to play. I mean, not exactly not to play, but like scale back significantly. I wanted to touch though on a point, when we talked earlier about like conveying knowledge and asking questions. You mentioned like being told, no, that's wrong, and that being kind of a pain point. There's a certain level of mutual human understanding that has to be, if not implicit, effectively communicated there, in the sense of you're talking to someone, you're trying to learn something from someone in an instance arguably more knowledgeable, intelligent, debate, but like knowledgeable on a subject than you are. You're asking them a question, they tell you they're wrong. From their perspective, and it depends on the context, but it has to be like, I'm not telling you you're wrong just because like I think you're stupid or you don't get it. Like there has to be an understanding that for both of you that you are trying to learn something. And so that hopefully that minimizes the level of frustration too. It's like, no, they're not pestering me. They're not pestering me just to be annoying. They want to learn. So I have to, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, several thoughts come to mind. It's like, it's hard, really, really hard to learn alone, like, just by watching YouTube videos or just by reading books and articles, because you have no active feedback on any of that. Like, no one really knows how much got into your head. And in a sense, this is why schools, they give you tests, because it is an external way to sort of verify roughly, what went in and what came out. And people are even better than that. Sorry, not people. Rephrase. Talking with people is a much more effective form of testing because you can essentially, like in free form, say, what your understanding is, and they can give you the most direct feedback. Like a good teacher will spot what pieces of knowledge you've gathered, which links are mistaken, which links are just missing, are just gaps, and they'll target that and fill that in. And so like that is very effective learning, right? It's the most direct path to understanding the whole piece of knowledge. And the other thought there is it's much better, or in my experience, like being able to privately talk to, one or two people is a much more, I guess, comfy and safe, just psychologically, because like this is I'm just saying, like it's sort of embarrassing, right? To keep trying to make effort and be wrong. And, like it never means you're stupid. It just means you have gaps in your knowledge, and that is a neutral fact. But to do so, for example, like let's say on Twitter in like a public post, and people like replying you're wrong, like that is very public, and sometimes that like actually stings quite a bit. Like of course, like we should all develop, thicker skin and that, and I'm doing my best. But yeah, just to say like, I guess very understandably, a lot of, again, going back to just barriers in the space, it's not everyone has like these very nice and patient experts in their fields to go talk to. Like for all the people around me that I know, like they've all been extremely patient and kind and generous with their time to like tell me answers and give me feedback on like what I'm thinking so I can get better. And I do my best with my time as well. But yeah, just in general, like these people, there's only so many of them to go around, and they only have so many hours. And it's like kind of maybe shame isn't the right word, but it is one of the limitations in the space where, we can't assign everyone who's new and enthusiastic like a personal tutor of sorts.
Right, because a good portion of the people, a good portion of the builders are to some extent making it up on the fly. Like, oh, what do you want me to explain this to you? I'm still trying to figure this out myself. I'm trying to put it together. But I definitely agree on the shame point. To borrow something from a group of YouTubers I watched who, people would put in their comments like, so some people would put like, well, you didn't do this correct, but here's why, like telling them they're wrong and also offering an explanation. And they were like, that's infinitely better than the people just saying, no, you're stupid and you're wrong, because then it's like, well, great. Now I don't know. I still don't know. And I feel bad. Thanks. Like, how am I supposed to improve?
Right. Okay. One very concrete thought there is if like for everyone involved, like either you're on the side seeking knowledge or the side imparting it, like when there is too big of a gap and there's like nothing you can do in like quickly 3 minutes, it's to throw out a few terms that this person can go then look up, right? I don't have any good examples off the top of my head, but instead of just saying, no, you're wrong there and it's too complicated and I can't explain it to you, like basically like, if you know any good references, either that's like a paper article or like an author who's like good on the subject, like refer them to that, or just like a term so they can like go to Wikipedia or Investopedia and look it up. And that is actually so much more helpful than just you're wrong and I don't have time to explain it to you.
For sure. And I can borrow a recent example, because here's a slight twist on that for it's just gather your thoughts or opinion on this. I had someone reach out to me in a Twitter DM maybe a week ago. They were asking me for they were asking me like, what would you recommend for best security practices with Solidity when making a smart contract? It's like, what resources would you recommend? And I'm looking at this DM like, I'm not a developer in I mean, I play around with some Python scripting stuff like that, but I am not a Solidity smart contract developer in any capacity. Why are you coming to me? And so, but it's the weird balance between like I'm not the person for that, but I also want to be helpful. So I pointed them to like some various resources that I was aware of. I hadn't examined myself because, again, not a smart contract developer. And I shared that. I shared that this had happened at a point, and someone put out, it's like, so wait, you don't know anything, and rather than telling them you didn't know anything, you just attempted to help them, even though, like where's the line? Like,
Mm,
it's that weird balance of trying to be helpful and point them in the direction. Well, yeah, like again, where's the
right.
happy medium there?
Yeah. Ah, this is the heart of so many issues. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's actually kind of weird with modern society is we have professional educators. Like, that's almost saying nobody else, because they didn't receive some sort of training, that they can't educate. Like, not to like educate, like I look down on you, but educate, just impart information, right? Like, we all carry so much information, whether that's like academic or technical, or just life experience that, like there's no cost really to sharing any of it. And like, it's not necessarily like you need to be accredited to do this, right? Like, okay, maybe that's like another rant, but like we place so much emphasis on, what is this word? Accreditation or accreditation or yeah. But basically just to make people feel like they need permission to do certain things. And like, that's one of the things, or I guess values of crypto that really speaks to me, is that the permissionlessness of it all, right? You don't need to be anything in particular in order to participate in the space, even though there might be, some educational barriers, there might be some other sorts of constraints, but it's never because someone in this space will, gatekeep and say, you don't have this, so you can't be here. Like, there's never any of that. Yeah. Or there shouldn't be, at least.
Or shouldn't be, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just anyone can be a participant. Which I'm going to tangentially, because I was thinking I somehow got on the tangentially take to governance in the crypto space, especially with tokens. Um, this concept of, I think it's called sortition, that I'd been reading about when dealing with governance, which is selection by. Well, actually, okay, I'll back up a bit first. What would you call? Would you call governance by the current mechanisms out there, by like token voting type of thing?
Mm.
What are your thoughts on that in general? Like a
Oh,
good or bad thing, pros
yeah.
and cons?
Yeah. Okay. So, potentially a little bit of alfalfa, because the system is very broken, and we, an unspecified group of anonymous individuals, are coming up with to potentially, maybe not even fix it, but just to introduce some new, cooler ways to do it, where we'll see if that works or fails. So, with the current system, there is one, I guess, very interesting aspect where we align people's financial incentives with governance. So, for example, I'm just going to use sushi, not to pick on it, but just as a common example that everyone's familiar with. So, for example, like if you wanted a lot of governance power in the sushi protocol, unless you've accumulated a lot, from the early days by using the protocol and being rewarded as sushi, you have to take a very large financial stake in sushi. And I believe there was a fund, Arca, that acquired a large slice of sushi because they wanted to quote unquote participate, But at the same time, it's like, I see the point of people making the argument that, yeah, like a protocol only wants to give away governance for people who have skin in the game. But on the flip side, people's financial incentives are now tied to governance. So how I mean by that is, for example, like if I wanted to participate in sushi, but I don't think it has good tokenomics, I think market conditions will bring price down. it is in my best interest not to participate because I'd be exposing myself to their price rate. And that's weird, right? I might have all the best intentions. I might have, the best ideas. I might be actively working on this protocol for, anyone knows. But I wouldn't want to be exposed to governance simply because I don't like its price. In a very strange way, that is very perverted. And in another sense, this is slightly hypothetical. I don't know, to what degree it happens, but let's say some hedge fund now acquires a very large chunk of sushi, and they participated in Mooncoin, which shall remain just Mooncoin, and Mooncoin blew up, right? So now this fund is insolvent or in a lot of debt, and now they must dump their sushi holdings to try to remain solvent or just, fully declare bankruptcy. They have to liquidate all assets. So now what happened to sushi? Let's say sushi was doing actually really well, things are going along, everyone's happy, and the treasury has a lot of sushi tokens. They have a very long runway. They can build for the next 5 years to see the next bull market again. And now suddenly this kind of exogenous black swan event happened. And now a hedge fund just dumped, dozens of millions of sushi tokens. And now the price just cratered and the team no longer has a viable runway, and things like that. So in that sense, the people who wanted to acquire a lot of governance in sushi became a liability to sushi that sushi had no control over, that the sushi community had no control over. And this is a very extreme example, but how is that fair, right? Or for example, in that case, let's say I am a sushi holder and I was actually bullish on sushi price and I like participating in governance, so now holding it. But because of the because of the bad outcomes of some other participant in the game, I am now wrecked. How is that fair, So all that just to say, when we tie in price exposure with governance power, the fates of everyone in the system, the protocol, the average community member, and these large whales, they're all tied together in that sense. And in one way, that's aligning everyone's incentives, but in another way, it's for risk management purposes, I shouldn't, tie myself down into the same essentially life raft or whatever analogy with these other entities, because I know sometimes they're going to do things that are not what I wanted. So I'll take a brief breather here.
It's fascinating to hear this because it just trying to think about and analyze different types of systems of governance, but thinking about it from the perspective of initially just in my mind, okay, you have larger governance, you have larger financial entities, be them whales or funds, different institutions who could buy up a good portion of governance power and utilize that, and they're in theory going to operate in their best interests. But then having that tied as capital, you're right, thinking of the implications as the example you used, some other sect element going bad where they then have to sell their governance portion. So just the analysis of the fact that there is capital at play directly tied to governance, a large entity, whatever their position, having to sell off a good portion also then paves the way for opportunity for other players to gain a large share of governance. It becomes a game almost.
It is.
I mean, it is all a game, but
so maybe here we leak a little bit of alfalfa. We won't go all the way, but sort of as a teaser. So we came up, and again, we as this very unnamed group of individuals.
Shadowy super coder. No, I'm kidding.
We've thought of two different mechanisms, not mutually exclusive, that we can try to basically split up the price exposure component to the governance component to these governance tokens. So essentially, then we will see how it works out. But essentially allows people to participate in governance without price exposure. And for the people who just want price exposure, they can do so without ever needing to govern, essentially. And of course, this means like people can still hang on to both parts if they wish, but we'll see if we can let the market price these two things individually as well.
It almost sounds like a multi-class stock share type of thing. You have class A shares with actual voting power, and then class B or C or whatever.
Yes.
Not to pressure for you to give more info, but that's akin to what I'm hearing.
Yes. Very similar. And so we're not going down that exact system where we force the protocols to make these shares ahead of time. It's we allow people, or if you think of them as like all class A voting shares, we find out ways to place permissions on them such that some like people can voluntarily transition out from these different levels. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And I'd been looking through various I was previously involved with a crypto project that I'm not going to go into too much detail, but they're very much espoused like a democratic republic type of governance system. They were going to have like, we will have a Senate and a House and an executive branch types of things. And I was trying to look at different ways of governance systems, and I came across one, and I don't know to what extent you've like studied governance systems, but one that kind of appealed to me was this concept, what's called sortition. Governance by random citizen, where your officials are selected at random. The immediate pro being that in theory everyone is going to act in everyone's best interest because no one knows who's going to be the next round of officials. So you're not going to do things that are going to inherently screw, let's say, members of a specific group because they might be in the next round or whatever for proposing or enacting legislation. The immediate con being that you're picking random people, so the level of understanding of what's at stake in proposing or enacting legislation is kind of a crapshoot. So,
I don't like to have very strong opinions, but I hate this idea, in the sense where it's that most people, we look to others for opinions and feedback and try to pretend that we can all have isolated independent thought. I think it's that's not the reality we live in. So not to say like this system has no merits of its own, but then it's like if you pick a random thinking of how to phrase this. Let's say we're running a society and we basically pick governance like through this random sorting system. To ask them about very complex subjects, if I were that person and they asked me something I don't know, I would much rather either defer to an expert or at least consult with them on it. So like, unless I was given that option where I can have access to the information and knowledge I needed to make these decisions, I would rather not govern, right? Because I would likely make very poor choices based on like flawed and bad assumptions.
You wouldn't trust your own judgment. Yeah.
Right. So unless the context is that in this system, everyone's more or less familiar with it, and everyone already has, a very good working understanding of what type of decisions will lead to what type of outcomes, then this could be viable, right? So for example, like you said, like if this is potentially adversarial system with many groups where somebody can like favor or disadvantage another group, as long as everyone understands the full like game theory of it, like potentially it could work, right? And I'm not saying it could work positively. Like people can figure out like, okay, I'll screw you this hard now, so like later on you can only screw me that hard back. Like it could evolve into that type of system, but at least everyone understands and can more or less predict what's going on. But otherwise, like it becomes like way too unpredictable and chaotic if we're just saying like have like a very broad body of people to govern a very complex stuff.
Yeah, we have to assume a baseline level of knowledge
Mm.
regarding what's at stake. And I should clarify, I wasn't like offended or anything. It was just an interesting
Mm.
concept, and I'm just curious your thoughts on it.
Mm.
Because I just like reading about governance things sometimes. Um, we have been going for at least an hour and a half at this
We
point.
have.
Uh, so I don't know if you wanted to continue or if we call it there. I mean, I'm looking back at like the podcast episode durations, and Kitsune's had from an hour to I think he had one for 2 hours. So transcribing that one's fun. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to keep going, but maybe for the sake of the podcast, we can truncate the recording here. Maybe we
yeah,
can
maybe
have
we
a more,
can chop it down or
yeah,
figure
and
out some stuff.
maybe going on from this point, we can just have a more casual one. And if people want to have like new topics they want to introduce, can either message V or I or come to Fanboy DAO's general channel and type it there. Otherwise, we'll just randomly chug along.
Let's see. I'll have to scroll back up because I feel like some people post topics, and I have it open. I was watching, but I think we were just too engaged in what was going on to.
Okay, to fill the time, I do have another anecdote. This is like sort of secondhand, but I think it. So like I might have some of the facts a little bit missing or wrong, but I think it does illustrate a good point. And
Okay.
it's about how governance is kind of fake in the space, in the sense where when you think about the voting system, there is no, what is this called? There's no way to uh, reinforce it, or like there's no like executive power. I'm thinking of this. I think this is the example I want to bring up. And again, if I get some of the facts wrong, it's because I didn't look into it too deeply. I think this was with DeFi Kingdoms. There was a bug in the code that somehow allowed people to use some loophole to infinite mint Jewel, basically. And this patch was brought up, I think, by the community. And obviously, this is an issue, right? Because like minting infinite tokens is going against like the expectation that everyone's working on. It definitely messes up all the tokenomics, and it means a lot of people are going to get screwed. And this was brought up, and this was brought up in the context of their governance forum, I think. And basically, like anyone who's aligned with the project is saying like, okay, this is obviously very bad. Good thing we caught it. So, let's propose a patch, a bug fix, and like get this issue fixed. And I think they had the voting on that, and it passed, but nobody did anything. And then it got exploited. And then it's like, okay, so governance doesn't work when there is no way to translate the voting result and enforce it in action, right? Because at the end of the day, the people that can do something, like can the devs do something? Like you can't make the devs do anything in this space. Not for good or bad, it's just the linkage isn't there. And in another sense, if we're talking about projects where there are multi-sigs, the multi-sig usually has all the control, right? And between the voting outcome and the actions of the multi-sig, are those two things linked? And I think not. Not directly anyway. Like, of course, like, if the people in the multi-sig, they have a public reputation in this space and they actively go against community voting, like, yes, their reputation is on the line, but it's not like a legal enforceable action against these people, right? If somebody chooses on the multi-sig to not listen to the community, then that's that. And so like in that sense, we're all talking about like governance from like, how to set up fair voting systems, token distributions and things like that. But it doesn't actually solve this very bottom level, that like a very critical level of like, how do we link together the results of these votes to action? Because like, no matter how good your voting system is, like elaborate snapshot schemes, like at the end of the day, it's worthless if they don't mean anything at the end.
Well, it seems like this illusion of governance just to
Mm.
just to trick people. You do matter. You are important in our ecosystem. Uh, we're not going to tell you the truth, but because we
Mm.
want to sell you our token. But
Right. And not to say like any system in the world does do that, like maybe this is a little bit of conspiracy-ish, but okay, sorry. The other way to just phrase that is, like in your local government or just any government body or like things that are usually like some sort of governance is involved, like how much did the I guess the voters opinion actually translated into what got done, right? Because, let's say it could be the case where we're talking about building a water pipeline through the city, and the community says, yeah, like it's a good idea. Let's just take the most direct route, going from the water station to downtown from the city hall. And maybe some city official thought, yeah, maybe that's not the best idea. We can route it here, to save some construction fees, and they go ahead and do that. And then it's like the point I want to illustrate there is like, for better or for worse, when these decisions get made, there are people in the middle who have some discretion over how the actions, whether they happen or not, or in which manner they do happen. And this is important because like we can't like have the crowd vote on like every single detail of constructing this water pipeline, the cost, material use, the company hired, things like that. So like some discretion of these leaders is important. But at the same time, like, did anyone how was this power discretion system built? Who had the say over that? Like who gave these city officials like the power for those things? Like, and did I, as like a particular voter or governor, or like not governor in that sense, but like a person with a say, like did I actually have a say in any of that? And it's like yeah, in some sense, like governance is skewed another way, because like if we're talking about token governance, what if the protocol just said, I'm going to hang on to 90% of tokens, so you guys get 10, so I retain 90% of governance power. But here is a very elaborate system where we can assume in a perfect world, all these nice, predictable outcomes can happen. But at the end of the day, I hold 90% of all the tokens, so none of that matters, right? So, yeah, it's a very fun topic to think about, but it's so rudimentary right now because there are so many ways to bypass like actual proper governance.
for all the talk of being a type of trustless system, just by utilization of okay, whoever built the system, you kind of have to put trust in,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
from the get-go.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a funny point, right? Because like for all this talk about like being trustless in a system, there is immense trust that you have to place into the system. And in some sense, I feel like that's what's keeping a lot of like institutional capital out, because like as much as this is so funny. So like institutions trust each other all the time, but it's actually quite trustless because they can sue each other. They have these enforceable actions that they can take against each other if they betray that trust. But we actually don't have that on chain. Like maybe on like, for example, like the very bottom level of the blockchain, where like if you're running validators and like there's a malicious validator submitting like bad blocks, like the other ones will slash it, and this happens more or less automatically. Like so, there's like some enforcement mechanism there. But for example, like when running all these projects that involve a lot of money, at the end of the day, you are placing trust into like, for example, the builders that didn't build in backdoor, like who actually checks for those things. And also like if it's like significantly controlled by a multi-sig, like yeah, you do have to place a lot of trust into these people.
And that trust is even abstracted out, like the people who espouse open source projects, open source software. The software is right there. You can go check the code. Okay, but you still have to understand the code and everything that's going on. So you kind of have to delegate your trust to quote unquote trusted actors in the space,
Yeah,
involved, or people who have the
right.
body of knowledge to know what they're talking about. So
hmm Yeah, and for like truly malicious actors in the space, like there's actually a lot for someone who's actively trying to cover their tracks, you have to be on their level to uncover it, right? So for example, like again, very hypothetical, but if someone say this is open source, here's my GitHub, and you check it and it looks fine, but where is the promise that what is shown in the GitHub is what's actually deployed on chain, right? Or like again, like this is maybe beyond my pay grade, but like people can upgrade contracts sometimes. Like, how do you know they're not going to pull one of that and like do something there, right? Like, just to say, like, even on the very technical level, like, unless you're working at the same level as the malicious actors, where like all their tricks, so you're looking for them, you're always going to be outsmarted by them. It's like the what is this? It's like uh, sorry, I'm listening to where it's like competitive warfare, where it's like you have to be as good as your enemy in order to like keep up. So like when the default is trusting people, it's like you lose very easily. So like I don't like it, but like we all have to be extremely skeptical in this space, right? If you want to be extremely, extremely safe.
yes, a level of skepticism has to be required, which I mean, in that regard, you could say like the we're all going to make it mindset is almost psyops
Mm,
in some sense. Like we're don't be skeptical. We're all gonna be fine. We're all gonna make it. Don't worry about it. uh,
yeah,
also needs to be more a sense of paranoia. We need to emphasize the dark forest. The the mempools and everywhere is a dark forest. Uh,
mm,
and I think we need to perhaps be more appreciative of like the quote unquote the white hat hackers out there protecting DeFi and protecting,
mm,
um, the benevolent individuals or coders who are, keeping an eye out for everyone else. They
right.
probably, I think there are many who don't get the credit that they
Mm.
deserve.
Right.
Um,
Here's another fun. It's not even a thought experiment. It's more or less just fact. It's like, when you, again, hypothetical, right? When somebody behaves as a black hat and they get, let's say a $100 million worth of exploits, the teams very quickly sometimes offer, okay, 10 million's back, no questions asked. But if that person, the person who could do this black hat exploit, chose to go down the white hat route and say, here's an exploit, I can basically like say prove it on testnet that I can get away with it and it's going to cost you 100 million. How much are you willing to pay me as a bug bounty? And they're like, oh, this is like a critical bug bounty. So how about $50,000? And then, like the incentives there are extremely messed up where we reward basically the black hats multiples more than we would ever reward a white hat, right? So in that sense, like I'm not saying I have a good solution to fix the system, but it's only to say we should be ever more grateful for the existence of white hats because all the incentives are aligned that if they could get away with it, they should become black hats. Right? I'm only not saying from the moral perspective, just from the economic incentives.
yes, purely from an economic incentive.
Mm-hmm.
It's a weird game. It's a weird system we all play in.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm just trying to see if we had any other questions. Someone mentioned VR, which I'm not entirely sure how to explore as a subject, honestly.
I mean, like a very quick question there. Like, do you not get dizzy when you put on these headsets?
Oh, so there is motion sickness is possible given
Mm,
enough time. I'll have to look into the research because I want to say people have looked into like a potential gene mutation as to the amount of nausea or motion sickness or whatever
mm,
I hear it's hit or miss. Some people like you need a couple days to like get your VR legs. Um,
Hmm.
but I can personally say I have had having spent let's see, what's the longest I've spent in VR? Probably like 6 or 7 hour sessions. And I've been pretty okay. I've very rarely had senses of motion sickness. And there are tools too, in a lot of these kind of games or metaverse platforms and stuff that try and reduce it, be it like rapid turning or various mechanisms to reduce the amount of motion sickness.
Yeah, I mean, like me personally, I haven't tried like VR intensive, but I know just from like playing games that are more 3D, like if the scenery basically spins around too fast, I just get dizzy from that. And maybe I'm one of those people who are more sensitive to this, but I used to get horrible car sickness when I was a kid. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and also like boat sickness, plane sickness, and it did get better when I grew up, and I did more sports related to spinning, like skating and things like that. But yeah, it's it's a challenge.
A challenge. So a VR chat session in the future is maybe not on the table, but I saw. Do we want to quote unquote open the floor to questions? Have people request or anything? I'm
I'm
going to
down.
say this. I'm going to say this from the perspective of it depends. A question being asked that I'm like I'm effectively a nobody here in this space, so I don't know how confident I would be in answering questions, but I'm open to it if people want to ask questions.
Well, you got me. There's two of us. Should be fine.
We can tackle it. All right.
Yeah.
Then if people want to request Mike, or yeah, ask questions, say something, this has effectively become kind of a casual hangout for the evening now. Going on. Oh, are we at 2 hours? Yeah, we've gone over 2 hours now. So people are open to request Mike if they want. Um, are we gonna let people shill bags?
Yes, but we're gonna block those people forever.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess people are a little shy.
No takers, at least right now. Because I'm trying to think of what else to. I was trying to think if Kitsune had anything else specifically, because I know he's trying to find other guests. And at some point, he was like, "Do you want to be a guest, B?" And I was like, "I'm not interesting to talk to."
Oh,
Uh,
come on, package handler. How is that not
oh,
interesting?
okay. Which
Okay,
I walked into that one. It's too good. But we do have a someone who's requested to speak. So, all right. Evan Jones, if you had a question or anything along those lines.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Um, I guess quick question from someone who doesn't really have any coding experience, but might be interested in trying to learn, kind of like at a higher level, what advice would you have, and like maybe like where to start, like what language should I start with? Should I consider doing like one of those coding camps, like the 10-week long ones or whatever? Um, from someone who's potentially looking is like kind of tangentially interested in that kind of stuff.
I will attempt to take a crack at it, and then maybe if you can add some more things. So, first of all, I'm not a technical person. I mean, as a hobby, try to learn a little bit just so I'm a little more informed. But if you're saying you want to work in the crypto or NFT or DeFi space as a technical person, there are definitely a lot of resources out now that you can do to do that. So, like off the top of my head, there's at least 3 or 4 different coding education DAOs or groups. One of them is Developer DAO. One of them is Encode Club. One of them is Buildo Space. And maybe later, if you just DM me, I will just type these down so you don't need to memorize any of these. So like there's 3 right there. There must be like at least 3 more that I can't remember right now. But the other thing, this is not original advice from me, it's just what I hear from a lot of people, is that if there is this idea or little passion project that you always wanted to build in the space, it would be very good to have that sort of as like a little goal to work towards, because when you tackle like just learning coding in general, like that's such a broad and deep field in general that it's hard to know or get that satisfaction to know that you're making tangible progress. So for example, if let's say the goal is to launch your own NFT project, that is very specific, that is very real. And once you get to that level and complete it, you will know for certain that you got good enough to do that. And that is a huge confidence boost.
And to add, let's see, Developer DAO, Learn Web3 DAO is another one. And there's not a specific, like, this is, I should say, outside of like smart contract development. There are definitely various resources for learning like Solidity or different smart contract languages or platforms, depending on like the blockchain you're potentially interested in looking at. But you could do technical or coding things that do not specifically apply to Web3, but Web3 could use. For example, front-end development. Countless crypto projects are going to need CSS designers or JavaScript front-end developers to plug into their contracts and APIs. So you're definitely not. I definitely wouldn't look at it from the perspective of if you're going to learn Web3, you're stuck with Web3. There are definitely very cross-industry, I would say, skills. Speaking as not a developer either, but having done some Solidity tutorials and a very basic understanding of the language. So a lot of it depends on what exactly you want to do, be it with a specific project, make an NFT project, make a token, join protocols, and work on things like analytics or web design. There are infinite opportunities, I would say, to explore. So I hope that answered your question, or helped at least.
Yeah, it did for sure. Thank you. I was able to copy those, the names of those DAOs down.
Awesome. And then there are various too. What is it? I can't remember the name of it. If you look up like Web3 job boards as well, there are various like dashboards and places that post like what positions that Web3 companies are looking for, and that can also give you an idea of, okay, a lot of places are looking for front-end developers, so that's maybe what I want to target, that type of thing, to give you a better idea of, outside of necessarily what your interests are, like what the market wants, for lack of a better term, like what's in demand as a skill set.
Yeah, and sort of to tag on to that, like we said, it's very specific to where each person is and where they're trying to get at. But if the goal is just to get into the space and start working on a little something, again, like the permissionless aspect of the space is what I like the most. So like I'll just use Yearn as my default example on these. It's they have a very public onboarding process that there's no filter there. Anyone can go through. You don't need any qualifications for. And then you can have access to these people that work on these day in, day out, but they do have little tasks or little bounties here and there. So whatever your expertise happens to be, if you can find a task that sort of fits under it, you can just begin working in this space. And this doesn't mean you need to quit your existing job. You need to totally get retrained. It's just to basically have a little bit of experience just to see what working in a space is like, what type of, actual routine daily tasks there are, and then making the decision from there as to how much more time and effort and resources you'd want to invest to go into this space deeply.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're curious as well, I also have a token to show if you're curious.
I don't know. Are we gonna stick to our guns, or no? We're not gonna.
Yeah, it's kind of risky. You can DM us and let us have the alfalfa first, and maybe we'll share later.
Yeah, so we'll take the poison pill and then it's like, oh, we'll keep this for, we have to vet it first. Us two non-technical,
Yes, we have
clearly.
to protect the investor.
Yes, potential investors.
You may have heard of it. It's Rocket Pool. I'll just leave it at that, and then I'll stop talking.
Okay, that sounds good.
But appreciate the question though. So yeah. Well, potentially that's helped other people here too. I'm not, I'm just casually looking through who all is still here, putting up with us.
Any other takers who want to come up and fill the space?
Fill the space, ask a question.
Y'all were trying so hard to get us Krelly's space, and now you guys are quiet. Like, shame on you.
Well, okay. This was very impromptu. Like, we didn't do anything in advance or anything regarding this. But we have another potential question. Quantum Watch.
Hey, Quantum, can you speak?
This is assuming I've operated the space correctly and I've made people speakers correctly.
Oh, yes, you did. Hi.
Okay.
Hi. All right. Yeah, really great talk. I can't really participate for long. I just want to comment on when we talk about the vernacular of TradFi versus crypto. Yeah, this is probably not new to everybody, but I'll just make what I think is a correct statement that in TradFi, we look at different instruments, stocks, bonds, etc. And even within the bond space and treasury space, for example, they all have their own unique way of looking at things, and so they'll use their own terminology that isn't canonical. So, in my view, it's okay that crypto does not abide by that. I don't think we're in a space in time where we should really constrain ourselves to even try to be abiding by any kind of standards, such as a swap in crypto can remain a crypto-oriented swap solved by the unique technology and as yet unestablished regulation to some degree compared to, as you said, swaps. So, for example, a swap in the commodity space is very different from a swap in the interest rate space. They're just completely different things. They're subject to different regulations, reporting standards. That's fine, and that's just the way it is. So, if we have our own castles, yeah, within crypto and within different spheres of crypto, I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's the way it should be.
Right, yeah, heavily agree. All the protocols should have their individual terminologies. We do not need to adhere to any standards. I guess like the point there is just whenever there's like a hot narrative, like people start. I guess this goes in the other direction. People try to lump in their mechanism with whatever is hot, just for the sake of like catching the narrative. Like EE tokenomics being a very good example of that. Like because not all VE tokenomic systems work the same way. Like they can be actually quite different, but because VE was the narrative for a while, like everyone switched to it, and now we have a lot of various mechanisms lumped under that, and like maybe that's the over generalization of these terms, and in fact we should have separated those.
And to add, I do also agree that like crypto in its own sphere could have or keep its own terminology. But there's a large amount of emphasis on copying TradFi mechanisms and bringing them over, which is where I think the desire to borrow and equate these terms comes from. So it's all a language game that everyone's trying to play, like make sure everyone understands. And we're inventing totally new programming languages. So why not invent new terminology?
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're highly self-critical. We, meaning participants, originators, DeFi developers, even and people structuring basically everything in crypto. And if something such as one of the classic questions that has been opined, where does yield come from? Trying to explain that to your mother or grandma or even your neighbor who isn't in the space is challenging. You can turn that around and go to the bond space and say, "Hey, where does it come from bonds? Where does where do where do bonds get born from?" I mean, you'd have to basically interview, um, in the traditional banking space, you'd have to interview how they approach companies. I mean, I won't go through all the mechanisms, but it is 100% opaque.
And in the chat, what is our favorite pasta? Do you
Oh,
want to go
God.
first, B?
Like actually asking?
Yeah.
Serious answer, the meme answer. I mean, the serious answer I would say is I have a thing for angel hair pasta.
Okay.
So yeah, the thin type of noodles, and yeah, just really can't go wrong with it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm more of the vanilla pasta type, just normal spaghetti is good.
Oh, sure. Okay, well let's expand on this a bit. Preferred type of sauce.
Oh, yeah, either white sauce or tomato.
Yeah. I will typically blend white and red. There's just something about like the white Alfredo sauce. It's just the combination that hits really nice. But I'm also the type who's fine with boxed mac and cheese if we're going like pasta related dishes. So
Yeah, I'm more of a economic eater than anything else because the sciences are littered with brilliant people living in poverty, just so you know. So yeah, I'm not picky. I eat whatever's cheap and bulk discount at Costco.
there you go. Well, I mean, we're all poor right now because of the market, so we're all ramen and ramen, spaghetti, boxed mac and cheese, rice and beans. Anyone else in terms of questions?
Final question?
Just picturing people like, oh my God, this space is so boring. Ugh, just end my misery.
Yeah, people are asking where are the moan sounds? I don't know if is that off limits?
I'm sorry, where was that question? What?
Oh, in private messages.
Oh, I was gonna be
Maybe another time for the sake of public decency.
yeah.
The actual official moan spaces will occur behind the token gated channels inside Fanboy DAO. Yes.
There we go. Yeah. Yeah.
We have a question about eggs in the coffee.
Oh, I knew this question was gonna come. Explain the coffee. So people who have potentially followed me for a little bit, is he still in here? He's probably not in here, but I gotta get Lawrence because he told me he would do it. And I don't even remember where I read this. Actually, I do. My last warehousing, not warehousing, but it's like the IT step job between like warehousing where I was a clerk and then moving into IT. But it was a job where I worked from 6 a.m. to 3 p.m. It was an odd schedule. Just for context, I promise I'll get to it. And because of the way the lunch schedules kind of worked out, I didn't have lunch until noon. So I get to work at 6, and for 6 hours, I'd just be there agonizing and hungry and running on coffee. And so I found this idea of blending an egg in your coffee to add just a little bit of protein to your morning if you needed like a quick breakfast. And it's literally dead simple. You take a milk frother wand, it's like one of those battery powered ones, crack an egg, and then I use a Keurig, I grind my own beans and add water and stuff like that. But when the coffee comes out, you use the frother, the heat the heat from the coffee cooks the egg, and it generates an absolute massive amount of foam. So it's really good if you like foamy drinks. And if you blend it well enough, you don't get like any sort of eggy bits or anything. And it's really quite, it's filling and it's pretty good. I try and have one every morning, an egg coffee. Maybe I'll post more like pictures on the timeline of like the foam, how thick the foam is when I make it, because it's a lot of foam. But egg coffee. Some people use immersion blenders, the there's like I think it originates from Vietnam. There's like a specific name for a dish, and it's like a dessert because they blend the egg with like sugar and cream, and then they drop it in the coffee. But I quite enjoy it, and I think it tastes fine.
All right. Wild. Someone's opinion, echoing. That sounds wild to me. I do have a longer form question from someone about, I think to summarize it is just the flaws of the current governance systems we have inside DAOs. Sort of like broadly the very flat structure where it's like one person, one vote, versus a more hierarchical, like corporate-like structure. And I can speak a little from personal experience on these. And it's like working in a absolutely flat structure is incredibly difficult, even if it's very well organized, because it's more like psychological than anything else, where everyone in crypto, more or less, is very good at something, whatever that might be. So like some people have very strong opinions and egos, let's put it that way. So to have a group of more than just like even a handful of individuals to like unanimously agree on any subject, it's next to impossible, because like most things in life, things are not completely right or wrong, or like there's always just a list of pros and cons. And to some people, the pros will outweigh others, and it wouldn't be the same for whoever voted against it. So in that sense, it's very difficult to get any sort of decisions done. And if you look at most projects, even if maybe now they're a little more flat and unstructured, in the beginning where the project is formed, it's usually one individual or a small core group of individuals who are aligned on the vision and built most of that out. And like now the flat structure is just to like build out little improvements here and there. But if you're talking about starting something from scratch as a large group, that is incredibly difficult. And in some ways, like the corporate structure exists in the world for very good reasons, because it is a very effective way to basically make sure that decisions get executed. Like we don't need to repeatedly have votes. We don't need to repeatedly have like forums and discussions. Like at some point, we do need a executive leader to just say go or no go, and to not have people question that, right? And this works like even in ancient times, mostly like on the battlefield. That's why we have layers and layers of lieutenants and generals and I guess whoever the monarch is on top. So yeah, like not to say that is a perfect system, but just to say there's definitely more things we can try, but the more hierarchical structure exists and it proliferates in the space because it definitely does work very well, despite a lot of the drawbacks or like the unfairness that's inherent in in hierarchical structures. I hope that is a detailed enough answer for now.
You're more knowledgeable on that, so I was going to yield to you for that type of
All right, so I think we can roughly wrap it up. Maybe last thoughts, because my earphones are now running out of battery. I'm running on 1 out of 2.
I agree. And again, it's like
now.
Twitter. Why
Yes.
mobile phone? Why mobile devices only? Why can't we run a space from
Exactly.
desktop? This seems. I get it. Everyone's mobile, but this is just such a. Give me my nice headphones and my nice microphone. Give me even my VR headset. Don't make me
Mm.
scramble to find a pair of earbuds and just. Anyways, rant aside. Last thoughts. Do you want to go first, or?
Yeah, I mean, maybe on the theme of just keeping things open and permissionless, like definitely one of the easiest things that is very effective in space is just to reach out to someone. Say, oh, there goes my last earbud. I hope it's still working. But I was just going to wrap up that thought to say that yeah, if you're a little shy and new to the space, just reach out to anyone. Like sometimes you'd be surprised at who'd reply to you. Like I want to say Vitalik's probably too busy doing fun things to reply to all the DMs, but like anyone besides that could very potentially get around to making a personal connection with you. And if you have very specific requests, that always helps. If you say what your background is, what you're looking for, if that's a job, if that's like internship or like a service that you think like you have that's valuable to this other person, like these are all excellent, right? Because that's how we get new opportunities to come up in this space and like potential collaborations. So yeah, I think I'll end my thought there.
I mean, I will definitely double down on the advocacy for. Yeah, I will double down on that in terms of reaching out. This space in the crypto space in general, I think is very open to anyone, any form of participation, and wanting new participants. The constant calls for more Solidity developers and that type of stuff. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out with questions or anything to various people. I lost my train of thought. So I want to thank everyone for coming. This was definitely very impromptu, and we're going to trim it down for the podcast. But thank you so much, Carnation, for being willing to come on and have this variety hour kind of session with me. It was very nice because we had like casual interactions, but it was very nice to actually talk to you and have these types of conversations. I think there were a lot of interesting, important topics discussed here.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I don't speak to package handlers enough in my life.
That's gonna follow me forever now.
Sure is.
I'm supposed to be I'm a forklift driver, remember? All right, well then thank you everyone for listening, and hope you have a good rest of your day or evening. Thank you so much.